and welcome back to the online summit series, Yoga Beyond Exercise, conversations to heal and lead us into the new paradigm of peace, harmony, and prosperity. Today's guest is Derrick Broze. Derrick is an investigative journalist, a filmmaker. He is a host of a radio show. He also is an activist, and he's a leader. Derrick is very passionate about bringing information to the masses and also solutions where there's problems. I know I was really inspired by his energy of action, and bringing that action out into the world in a time when we need it the most. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hi, Derrick. Thank you so much for coming on to the summit, Yoga Beyond Exercise. Welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great. I really feel honored. As I was mentioning, I've been watching your videos and kind of following you online since I heard about you. And what was really inspiring for me to have you on as a speaker was seeing how you ride that balance between consciousness and action. I know you call what you do conscious resistance. So could you talk to us a little bit about that and kind of how you got into this? Because I know you have like a huge story. You didn't just pop up and you're, this person, but.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me on. For anybody who's not familiar with my work, I'm Derrick Broze, originally based in Houston, from Houston. And for the last 10 years, I've just been involved in various forms of activism. I got into freelance investigative journalism in 2012, 2013, and I've been doing that full time. I have a radio show that's based in Houston that I'm still doing, even though I'm not living there, and generally spend my time either writing articles, doing video reports. I've written 5 books, producing documentaries. A lot of it is just involved on using the written word to try to get people to question the things around them. But as you said, I definitely didn't start out doing these things. I just actually turned 36 yesterday, so I've been doing this for the last decade. And so I spent the first 20 or so years in a very different state of mind. And I think like many of us, sort of just looking for answers. And I was also battling a lot of depression when I was younger, and a couple of suicide attempts in my teenager years. And that eventually led me to get, basically I started using drugs. I got addicted to drugs after high school and did that for a couple of years. And that eventually led me to get addicted to crystal meth, which led me to go to prison after I was arrested with possession of crystal meth. And that was November 2005. So almost 15 years ago, just 15 years ago. Yeah. And that was a big catalyst of change for me in my life, to start kind of looking at what I've been doing and trying to understand why I was using drugs and what I was trying to escape from, what I was trying to self-medicate, and starting to do a lot of that introspective work. It's also where I discovered meditation. When I was locked up, I started meditating every day, and had my grandmother sending me like the Dhammapada, the Buddhist Bible, and sending me books on Zen Buddhism and things like that. And so I really started to just do that every day, journal, meditate, and trying to have that kind of reflection of why I was in that position. I started doing some of that inner work, and kind of seeing that the source of a lot of my personal pain was coming from my relationship or lack of relationship with my birth father, and started to understand that better and try to reconnect with him and communicate with him about that. And so I had that kind of spiritual personal journey beginning in 2005. I went between 2005 and 2008. I kind of went back and forth between getting locked up and getting out. And I was just like in this process of realizing like, this is not where I want to go, but I didn't figure it out the first time. And I ended up doing 18 months behind bars in Texas state institutions. And I got out October 2008 for the final time, and was just, able to be happy about life, and to say that I, loved myself, and was able to just start working on a lot of my own trauma, but also looking at the ways that I'd hurt other people in my journey and things like that. And it was around this point when I started to, as I'm kind of lifting of this cloud of depression and drug abuse and addiction and stuff, and coming back into the world, I really was just remembering and rediscovering that I'm an intelligent person, that I like to read, I like to write and learn. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey of watch this documentary, read this book, and the rest is history. And so that was about 2009 or so when I started to question the world. And then, as I said, by 2010, I started to get more into activism. I started an activist community called the Houston Freethinkers, and was involved with them for about 7 years, doing everything from protests to community garden builds and skill shares and house parties and just documentary screenings, all kinds of fun, activities in Houston and around the Houston music, art, and kind of spiritual communities, bringing activism into that, kind of bridging that world. So yeah, I've been doing that for going on 10 years. And as you said, my work is called The Conscious Resistance. And I gave it that phrase, that idea that, I mean, it came to me honestly just in 2012, 2013, after doing my first couple years of activism, particularly, like I said, I had the spiritual kind of awakening or, rediscovering first. And then I started to discover and question things in the political world and the physical world. And for the first couple years, I had two different lives basically, because I had my spiritual friends and my meditation circles and consciousness groups. But I often noticed that when I would talk about, like, hey, have you guys seen this latest police shooting? Or have you heard what the government's doing this? Or did you hear what Big Pharma's doing over here? There was a lot of kind of put your head in the sand, don't talk about it. Don't, you're going to manifest it. Don't talk about negative things. It was very much sort of a discouraging of having those conversations. And so I was like, okay, I guess I won't talk about it. And then I had the same experience on the other end with my activist friends, many of them being people who I think consider themselves very logical and rational. And so they are maybe atheists or just disinterested in the spiritual realm and kind of the world beyond the five senses. And so I wouldn't bring any of those things up either. And so I just had these two different worlds. But eventually in 2012, 2013, that phrase, the conscious resistance, came to me. And all that means, it's, to me, it's the recognition, the understanding that the struggle for a more free, ethical, and just world that I think many of us are fighting for is not only going to come from fighting the physical institutions of power, and it's also not only going to come from meditating all day and only working on your inner world, that it's the balance of these two worlds that I believe is ultimately going to lead to lasting generational change. And so that's what I consider the conscious resistance to be.
Wow. Yeah, I am with you 100%, having been on both sides for the most part, mostly spiritual, but that's what I'm seeing as the paradigm is collapsing, is that, in the spiritual world, people are fighting with each other. And it's like, okay, so what didn't get purified, so to speak, in your emotional body, so that you're still having, this resistance to what is. And then, of course, on the other side of that is just like what you were saying, is like not even wanting to go into the spirituality of it. But we're all conscious beings with the ability to be aware of ourselves, and we have choice all the time. So talk to me then about like what you're up to now, like with your radio show and with everything in the current world, and what that looks like.
Yeah, so I do have a weekly radio show, as I mentioned. It's on Houston FM radio, but of course it's obviously on the internet everywhere as well. And that is continuing. It's something that I enjoy doing. I'm able to broadcast that using the beauty of technology with my co-hosts that are back in Houston, and then we still get to broadcast it on the Houston airwaves, which is really cool because it's the fourth largest city in the country. And even though more and more people turn to the internet, obviously, for their information, we definitely get a lot of listeners who just, are scrolling through the radio, or people who are dedicated to hearing us, and just people who randomly find it and, appreciate what we're talking about. And it's honestly been interesting to still do that radio show during all this COVID everything, because I've actually noticed that in the last couple of months, I've been getting more and more censored and fact checked. I actually had my YouTube channel deleted off YouTube just last month after broadcasting since 2012. I had over 5 million views, 65,000 subscribers, and thousands of videos, and they all got deleted. Uh, saying that we were spreading false information about a variety of things they basically made up. And I just thought it was interesting that while that's happening, I'm still able to broadcast on the FM radio, which is like, old school for a lot of people, and nobody's censoring us there. Like, maybe we're sort of skating below the radar, but I just thought that was interesting. On the free internet, we're getting censored for talking about certain topics, but I can still use the radio show to get that message out to Houston, which is my hometown. So I appreciate that. And other than that, I continue to report weekly. I'm actually right now, before we got on this call, I'm wrapping up an article right now for The Last American Vagabond. It's the main place that I produce written content. It's ran by a friend of mine, Ryan, who's another great investigator. And I'm, writing a lot about the current vaccine situation that's unfolding both in the U.S. and in Mexico, where I am, as well as in Canada. So I'm doing regular articles on a weekly basis and continue to produce videos. I'm I actually just released a couple of new books, or sort of updated of my books, the Conscious Resistance trilogy, which basically takes a lot of the sort of ideas that we're discussing here and expands upon them in three different books. They were originally published in 2015, 16, and 17 as separate books, but now we're republishing them. Me and my co-author, John, we basically, we were really blessed, and we got a publisher that supports my work and wants to help us get these ideas out there. So they have now helped us update. We're republishing them all as one book that's just called the Conscious Resistance Trilogy, which everybody can find, all over the usual places. And it takes these ideas of looking at the spiritual realm and looking at the political realm and looking at the search for meaning, the search for consciousness, the search for freedom, and how does that apply to those of us who are pursuing something, a world better than we currently see now? Like, how do we create that? What does that actually look like? And how do we promote individual liberty and personal responsibility, and a lot of these concepts that are really important to me, as well as spiritual um, concepts that come from our native communities, like the 7 generation principle, and other important principles in connecting to the planet. How do we bring that world together? And so, as for myself, I do consider myself to be a spiritual anarchist. I believe that we are all capable of organizing our own affairs and ruling our own lives, and doing so in a fashion that I think can promote the most freedom and the most liberty and equity for people. So I'm promoting that through the book still, and I also have another book that just came out in Spanish that's super relevant right now because of everything going on. It's called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which is about a lot of the things we're seeing. I'm sure your audience is familiar in many ways. Some of the things that are a little disturbing and maybe frightening from the response to COVID, particularly in the area of vaccines. And my work is always focused on solutions. From the very beginning, when I started to wake up in 2010, I had my freak out moment, like many of us, like, oh my God, everything's going crazy. It's all about to happen. That sort of impending doom feeling. But that was followed very quickly by what am I going to do about it? How can I reach other people? How can I help myself? How can I help more people? And for me, the answer in the very beginning was just, just need to talk to more people. I need to meet more people. I need to help more people know. And I can definitely say from 2010 to 2020, there are so many more people questioning things going on in the world now than there were whenever I started to join the whole, struggle. And it's been just honestly a beautiful journey to be a part of that. And so I want to continue to provide solutions, whether that's through my books or through, whatever it is that I'm producing. And so How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, I published this in January, right before COVID started happening. So it doesn't mention COVID at all, but it's extremely relevant because the same problems that we're seeing proposed as the solution to COVID were already existing prior to COVID. And the rise of facial recognition cameras and surveillance everywhere, and the Internet of Things and 5G, and a lot of these things that many people were already concerned about are now being expanded in response to COVID. And without getting too deep into that, I tried to think of how do we, as free, beautiful, powerful people, survive and thrive in a world like that? How can we, if we say, I don't want to submit to your vaccine, or I don't want to have my face scanned everywhere I go, or I don't want to have my retina scanned, or, what does that look like? And is that even possible? And so that's what that How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State talks a lot about, how to kind of understand what we're facing, this philosophy that we're seeing promoted in front of us, that it does have a name. It's called technocracy. And it's actually an older philosophy that has really just kind of been behind the scenes for a while. And now we're seeing it sort of brought out front and center, this idea that experts and scientific elite essentially should be the ones to micromanage society. And we're told that this is for the good of all people, for the good of, the whole. And I think many of us, of course, have our doubts about that. But yeah, so I've been promoting those books lately and just continuing to put out my articles. I can honestly say that I was thinking about this earlier, this has probably been the most successful as far as my work goes, as far as reaching people, which is how I measure success, but also the most stressful and trying times, I think, in recent memory, because it feels like it's hard to even take a moment to breathe because there's so much to share right now. There's so much important information that I personally feel obligated, because this is the role that I've chosen to be in. Like, I make sure to find time for myself. I'm here in a beautiful place. I'm enjoying. I have not too many complaints, but I also find myself like having to, like, all right, at some point I have to put it down. I have to like get away from the computer screen. I have to unplug, even though it feels like it kind of feels like the way it did when I first started waking up. Like these people, they are working 24 hours a day. Like I need to be working just as hard to try to build solutions and to help people and to support myself, you know, all these kinds of things. And over time, you sort of start to settle down. You're like, all right, yeah, there's some crazy things on the horizon, but it's not here yet. But I honestly feel that way again. I feel like, all right, there's, you know, some really scary possibilities and some really beautiful potentials that are kind of right on the horizon. And I honestly feel, and I've been trying to remind any of my audience and my listeners that I believe that this is the reason that we are here right now. I know for a fact 100% myself that this is the reason that my creator brought me here and put me in this position and gave me this voice and this body and this, you know, this mind and this heart to be here, to try to be a part and to be a positive influence on things. You know, I'm just one person like all of us trying to figure this out, but I know fully, even this conversation, I know that this is why that we are here, that all the connections that are starting to happen that have just really started to, you know, seem to happen exponentially, just so much growth as far as reaching new people, meeting new minds, meeting so many other beautiful people that are just working on, you know, in their own realm. And that's honestly what brings me hope and joy in spite of all the crazy things going on. Understanding, wow, I've met so many great people. I have friends in India, friends in Australia, friends in the UK, across Europe and Mexico, elsewhere, who are all doing the same things I'm doing in their own ways, working just as hard to reach people, to come up with solutions, to see how we can help each other, to see how we can build a better world. You know, not just again survive and scrape by in this system that they're attempting to build for us, but how do we thrive? How do we continue to work with Mother Earth and work with each other and balance ourselves and do that? So yeah, I know that even with the kind of the intensity of like feeling the need to keep reaching people, that there's so much beauty going on, and I'm thankful to be a part of that. I'm thankful that you guys are a part of that.
Yeah, for sure. It's so interesting. Um, it's just so interesting. It's like all the thoughts about everything are just flooding through me right now because you bring an energy of like this, it's like a new energy to an old issue. You know, this issue has been going on for thousands of years. And the issue at hand, the way I see it, is that humans are coming into contact with themselves, right? And so the external is going to have to, is always right, we're master manifestors, us humans. And so it's going to always create something externally to point us back at ourselves, right? And that's why we're holding the beauty, the intense beauty with the intense suffering all at once, all at once. And it's like, oh, it's like incredible because the mind doesn't, it naturally wants to go to like what, like good or bad. It's like, oh, one thing is good and one thing is bad, but it's like, no, like that's what yoga is. It's like holding it all at once and like letting go of the judgment because it just is, right? The Zen, I think in Zen, it's like just sitting with all that is, you know, sitting with what is. But then the balance, which is exactly why I love having you on the show, is the action part, because
Yep.
that is so important, is that once we tune into, so this could be have been going on right for thousands and thousands of years, but all of us tuning in and then doing our part for each other, right? And that's like where we get our energy, so to speak. Like I can feel it even through this computer, and like when I see you I can feel your energy. The audience doesn't know, but you run for mayor of Houston?
Yeah, I did run for mayor of Houston last year.
I mean, you're like really into action, and that is, I enjoy it because I think it's so important that we all tap into wherever we're at and then move from that, right? that's like getting control over our lives as opposed to some entity, government, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter. Could be a partner, could be a boyfriend or a girlfriend, it could be a husband or a wife, it could be a child, it doesn't matter. Like having that control when we're all sovereign at the core. We're in control of ourselves. People can't do something to us. They can trespass. But that's like more a deeper like karmic issue. Yeah, so what is your, I don't know, message or advice to people who, because it spans all generations now, with kind of like in the US it started with the election. I think that was kind of a big one with the division, you know.
Yeah.
But understanding that we don't have to be so divided, right? That's a paradigm that's been sold to us.
Yep.
Right? That's man-made. That's not what we are. We're here to love each other and to connect. And that's that self-governing thing. Ooh, yeah, you can talk to us about anarchy, because they even changed the definition of the word anarchism in the dictionary. So maybe, because I know, I love when you were talking about holistic anarchy. I just love
Sure.
that.
Yeah, I can talk about that. And I do want to just add to, you know, as far as taking action, like I said, solutions have always been important to me. And particularly, I was mentioning that when I was locked up, it was Zen Buddhism, it was Zazen that like was the first type of meditation that I learned and that I started to really have that personal journey on. And I've actually written a little bit about connecting these ideas of taking action from like a Zen perspective, because you know the Buddha talked about watching your thoughts, your words, your actions, because your thoughts become your words become your actions become your behavior, and your behavior becomes your destiny. And that always stuck with me, because it made me realize, okay, so if I'm aware of something, a problem, whatever that may be in the world, and I have it and I'm holding space for it in my head, am I telling anybody about it? Am I communicating about it? Am I looking for solutions? Or am I just allowing it to sit here? But then when you allow that, okay, I recognize it's a problem, I'm going to speak to other people about it, I'm going to try to learn about it, and then I'm going to take action behind that to try to see how can I, you know, improve that, or what role am I playing in that. You can see how it really starts from those thoughts follows action. Then when you do that, when you follow your thoughts and your intentions, not just sort of like vaguely wishing or hoping or praying that the world would get better, because I think that's important, but I believe that the creator wants us to act as well as to pray and to meditate and to put those intentions. You know, I don't believe that manifestation happens simply from thought alone. I do believe that there's a, you know, we're, like you said, we're conscious beings, but we're also physical beings. There's a dual component there. And every single thing that I've been able to do for the last 10 years and accomplish has been through manifestation, has been through putting it in my head, knowing, like sort of mulling it over in my mind, and then starting to tell like a loved one or someone, or even just posting about it on social media and just starting to like speak it out loud and develop it until it starts to become a reality that I'm taking actions, you know. But it's not just a sort of, this is what's going to happen, this is what I need to happen. It's a consciously co-creating what, you know, your intentions are, and putting that out. So, you know, I know that action can be intimidating, but even if you don't want to run for mayor or anything like that, which I would maybe recommend against, then, you know, do whatever it calls to you. Go out and plant a garden, you know, go out and connect to your neighbor, get to know yourself. There's so many different modes of action that we can take that don't always have to be the person on the bullhorn or the person, you know, giving the interviews or writing the books or whatever. We each can help and contribute in different ways. And as far as the idea of holistic anarchism goes, so to me, this is kind of the evolution of the conscious resistance. And sort of as years have gone on, I've been able to put it into better words and better terms, I think. And so I do consider myself to be an anarchist. And as you said, most people would define that or believe it's defined as chaos, disorder, you know, confusion, these kinds of things. But really, when you look at the term and the origins, the Greek origins, it just means without rulers. And, you know, this is as basic as we can put it, is that you, everybody hearing this, is a free, powerful, beautiful human being that is capable of organizing their own affairs, and that does not need to have a centralized authority over them telling them, this is what you can eat, this is what you can, you know, drive, this is what you can, just this sort of micromanaging our lives, that we each are capable of doing that. And so in that absence of rulers, which would also imply the absence of government, It doesn't mean that there's this sort of anything goes, free for all, there's no laws, there's no rules, there's no norms. It doesn't even mean that there's no police per se. It just means that the institutions as we know them now wouldn't exist, because they are, for one, they are centralized, they are also involuntary. What I mean by that is, if you have ever tried to say, for example, I don't like that some of my tax dollars are going to fund this war, to fund this pipeline, or fund this program, I'm going to withhold my taxes. If you've ever tried to do that and tell the IRS that, you might have had some trouble. They threaten to put people in cages and take more money away from you and fine your livelihood, which to me, it's like, that's a threat on your life. That's an involuntary relationship. It's essentially saying, pay up or we're going to put you in a cage, or we're going to take, your possessions from you. And so there's nothing that is consensual, that is voluntary. And those are the kinds of relationships that I really try to abolish in my life, whether that means with the business owner I support, the person I choose to marry, the person I choose to do business with, or government entity. If I only want voluntary consensual relationships in my life, because I think that what that is, it's a mutual respect of each other's autonomy, that you are an individual being that owns yourself, and that you own the products of your labor and your time and energy, and that I can disagree with you. I can, strongly disagree with you, and maybe I don't like your lifestyle, or I don't like your diet or whatever, but at the end of the day, it is wrong, immoral, impractical, unethical for me to use force or violence against you or coercion to make you live the way that I want. And if that is wrong on the individual level, then it's also wrong when it comes to government. If it's wrong for me to come take money out of your pocket and say, hey, I'm going to go use this money to do good things and feed the homeless, then it's wrong for me to say, I'm going to vote for somebody who's then going to order the government to take money out of your pocket to go do this good thing. It doesn't make it right simply because it came from some government. And so, I've spent a lot of time coming to those conclusions, and I write a lot about this in my books, these idea of how to approach anarchism from a spiritual perspective. And as I started to do that, I also saw weak points, I think, and blind spots in the kind of anarchist community, and their analysis. A lot of times it's very, it's very focused on economics and finance, like how do we, what's going to be the economic system that's going to come after the government. There's a lot of this kind of philosophical, just mental masturbation, for lack of a better term. It's just like, well, what is the world going to look like maybe at some point in the distant future that we may never ever get to? Like, it's very impractical as far as I'm concerned. So I started thinking about how do you, for one, promote anarchism and help people understand that they own themselves, even if they don't like that term. Some people use the term voluntarism, just self-ownership. It doesn't really matter to me at the end of the day. It's just recognition of that principle that you are a sovereign being, that you're a conscious sovereign being, and that nobody has the right to tell you how you can, live your life, so long as you're not infringing or impinging on anyone else's freedom to do the same. So, as long as we come to that most basic understanding, then from there we can figure out some of the more complex issues. We can agree that we're not going to solve our problems with violence, and that we're going to find other ways to collaborate, to coexist. And when those things aren't possible, we find ways to just basically go our own way, but we don't use violence on each other. And I started to understand that many times people are focused on these philosophical arguments, these economic arguments for anarchism, and just trying to convince people in that way. My focus has been, how do you communicate this message and help people see that, once again, you have an active role to play? It's not just about pointing your fingers outwards and saying the government's the problem, or the corporations are the problem, or Monsanto, or whatever name you want to put in there is the problem. But it's also about pointing the finger back to ourselves and saying, how am I contributing to these problems, and what role am I playing in this? So just one example, I've seen a couple of years ago there was really big marches against Monsanto all around the world, and I was very involved in Houston with this, doing the Houston March Against Monsanto. And so the activist group that I started, the Houston Freethinkers, we did like a collaboration with the Houston Monsanto group, and their plan was to go out and have this march outside in one of the busy parts of the city and have a big outside march. And I was like, that sounds cool, we can go do that. And I said, how about after we do that, let's connect to the local community farm. There was this really beautiful place called the Last Organic Outpost, and let's invite everybody to come over there after we protest and march and learn how to grow our own food, and learn how to grow non-GMO crops, and learn how to take care of the bees, and all these problems that were driving people to be at the protest, to come march against Monsanto. Let's actually do some proactive activism in there. And so we had probably 300 or 400 people show up for the march, and maybe 5 show up for the garden. And that is kind of emblematic of the problem, that people are very focused on like raging outwardly, which there's a time and a place to confront power. I definitely support that and advocate for that. But if we're only doing that, if we're only pointing our fingers outwardly, and if we're only putting our energy out there, oh, they're building a pipeline over here, let's go protest over here. Oh, they just killed somebody, let's go over here. Let's, not only are we allowing them to dictate the game, they do something and all we do is we react, we respond. We're not being proactive. We're not being forward thinking. We're not looking at how we're contributing to these systems. So that to me is what most modern activism, it's very reactionary. And when I talk about holistic activism or holistic anarchism, the idea is that as opposed to only being focused on, one particular part, like, hey, what is the Federal Reserve up to? What is the Rockefeller family up to? Or what is Bill Gates up to? Instead of only putting energy out there, we look at ourselves and say, well, in what ways am I contributing to these problems? Somebody might say, I'm very concerned about oil spills that are taking place in pipelines around the country. But then maybe they haven't stopped to see how much their life is dependent on those products that they're protesting against. And that's not for me or anyone else to judge. It's just about each of us to say, okay, hold on, let me stop and be honest with myself. Like I can protest all day, but as long as I keep using this bank that's funding the pipeline, then who am I to go out there and criticize the world or tell other people what to do? It's all about self-examination and looking at things holistically. And so I tell people to look at your economy, like the way you make your money, as well as where you spend your money and who you support with that money. And then I also think the type of money, because now we're living in a time where people can create or invest in alternative currencies, whether that's local paper currencies or silver or gold or cryptocurrencies. There's ways to kind of operate, to make money, to spend money, and to hold value, which is essentially what that comes down to, without supporting these old systems, without supporting these banking systems and things like that. Then maybe the food system, you start thinking of where am I getting my food from and who am I supporting in the process of getting that food? Who's making money off my food choices, and is it good for me? Is it good for the planet? Start kind of looking at these different areas of your life and seeing in which ways we can improve. It's not about like, oh, let's just feel all horrible about ourselves. We're all, because in one way or another, we are all contributing to problems that we probably would like to change. And so the first step is to acknowledge that, to see that, hey, I'm contributing to this problem. And if I want to change that, I can't only ask the world to change. I need to do my part to change what's within my reach. And when we each start doing that, we start looking at how within our own little sphere of influence, we can make these positive changes. We are going to see those rippled outwards. Like if each of us did that, I had a podcast back in 2013. It always sticks in my head. It was called "For the Good of Everyone, Focus on Yourself." And I kind of feel that that's like, where we're at. Like, yes, we do need to educate and raise awareness on all these great travesties taking place in the physical realm. But if we only put our energy out there and not in here, I think we're setting ourselves up for failure. And I really honestly do believe, that's the idea of the conscious resistance and holistic activism, is that if we put the same energy into these systems, and so just say, for example, maybe we get rid of all the corrupt politicians, and there's major changes. Maybe there's even some kind of revolution, and it's peaceful, and we believe we've created this wonderful world that we want. But if we don't do the internal personal work, I guarantee you within a generation or two, maybe 100 years, we're going to cycle back and probably create a worse problem, because then you're going to have a bunch of people who are running around thinking that they got everything figured out without having done some of that ego shadow work, and I think that could create even more problems. So to me, the answer is like, while we're trying to expose the political corruption and the corporate corruption and understanding the flaws in that system and looking and promoting it and learning about solutions in that realm, we have to be working equally as hard to cultivating, our own personal growth. So, we need to tend to the soil and tend to the earth, and we need to tend to our own kind of personal garden at the same time. Like, it's the coexistence of these things, which I think is going to lead to a longer lasting change. I don't believe that voting, I don't believe that violence is going to lead to the change that we want. It could produce maybe some short-term gains and things of that sort, but in the long term, in the generational, again, thinking of the 7 generations and beyond, it has to be an individually driven kind of movement, or conscious evolution, essentially.
I agree with you 100%. It's a conscious evolution that we're going through now. If we're going to thrive, right, as a species, it's obviously things couldn't keep going as they were. with everything, the way that we are consuming. You know, it's an imbalance of consumption versus giving, right? If that's out of balance in any way, in any ecosystem, it's going to fail. And so, yeah, so I'm so happy to hear that this is what your books are about and this is what you're talking about. And because it's so much better, as you know, you and I both know, on the other side of, I mean, it's an ongoing thing, the self-reflection, but like you sleep at night in such a good way when you know that you are acting from your highest place, you know, and refining that all the time, you know, but it becomes a joy. I call it an adventure. You know, it's an adventure. I don't know how people can be bored, you know, because I don't know what any moment is going to bring into my life, because I'm living it to my best and fullest capacity, right? In service.
Definitely an adventure for sure.
You're right. I never thought I'd be sitting here talking to you. And I'm loving it. Like, my whole world has been opened up to like whole, it's like I feel like I really feel that connection to the whole world right now, to like every single being in this world. I and I
It's
believe we're coming into more of a telepathic way of being, so I've just been like literally telepathically, you know, just
I
reaching.
don't doubt it at all, because I mean, I can just say that I've had this really, I don't know, again, it reminds me of just the feeling of kind of first waking up, this kind of renewed sense of like, oh my God, there's this, you know, there's this, something's happening, you know, both again, like in the really kind of scary ways and in the, oh my God, I can't believe I'm connecting to so many awesome people who are doing so many great things. Like, this is really powerful. I can feel this potential rising up. And I definitely, you know, you talk of telepathy, I do feel like, you know, whatever you want to call it, that it's a more connected feeling, that perhaps those of us who are truly in pursuit and trying to think of like, how are we going to make it to the next generation? How are we going to thrive in the next generation? How are we going to continue to live in balance and harmony as much as possible in a world that seems increasingly less harmonic and less balanced? That it feels like those of us who are on that pursuit are finding each other at a rate that I have never seen, like at an exponential rate. And so maybe that's part of the kind of telepathic being connected.
Yeah, I mean, in my understanding, you know, the more in tune you are with who you are at the core, through all the layers, you know, your frequency. Actually, this is what I was just talking to my last guest about, Ginny, about resonance. And, you know, we're resonating with ourselves. And so when we're resonating, you know, we're putting out that frequency. So more and more people that are resonating with themselves in that, you know, highest frequency, we're able to find each other easier and faster. And now we have the technology of the internet, and it's I mean, I've been on this path for like 30 years, and like like what I've been dealing with in my emotional body is literally getting over the persecution, because for so many years people were like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Well, now I'm like, I just can't not talk about it anymore. Hence me putting
Yeah.
together this summit. It's like, okay, so now we're going to bridge this. Yes, you're waking up and you know that you can't work your corporate job, and now you want to coach people or whatever it is. And then marrying it with like, what is your responsibility here? You know, because we're waking up to ourselves in levels and
Yeah.
layers, and it's just onion, you know, the onion that's just
Yeah.
coming off and coming off. Because if we do want to live in peace and harmony, it's here.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate you for holding down the journey for the last 30 years before those of us who've just arrived, you know, and honestly, you know, like I said, I've been doing this for 10 years, and there's people who are messaging me saying they just started paying attention last month, and like, just found your work 2 months ago, like just found, you know, there's definitely more and more people. So I appreciate people like yourself who, I think you probably faced more persecution and probably just people ignoring you than those of us who've been around more recently, because obviously right now you can get called crazy, conspiracy theorist, whatever kind of name you want to throw out there. That does happen. But as I said earlier, I've seen more people questioning today than there were 10 years ago. So I can only imagine in the last 20, 30 years, how difficult it would be to talk about some of these ideas and just generally talk about evolving human consciousness and trying to face some of the realities. So I appreciate yourself and everybody who's kind of laid the groundwork for all of us that who are trying to do things now and trying to collaborate with you as well.
Well, it's funny because like all of us, it's like everybody who, but we're all here at the same time in the same space. It's like, had I not gone into this, say 30 years ago when I first left my parents' house in Massachusetts and like woke up to myself, then I wouldn't have learned everything I needed to learn that and experience to help other people, just like other people did it that could help me. And just like you've done it, so you can help other people. It's like a chain reaction that goes in every different direction, you know? And it's amazing. And that's the power that human beings have. Like that's all I love to talk about is the actuality of being human and how much power we wield when we understand what that means and then start to work on the layers, the emotional layer, the energetic layer, you know, the physical, and start paying attention and hear what your external world is teaching you about yourself, right? But the part that is most interesting to me of everything that's going on, and I don't know if y'all in your circles talk about this, but we're in a shift of ages right now. We're going from a Piscean era into the Aquarian. And the Piscean is, you know, a more earth energy, whereas the Aquarian age is air, and it's new, it's the unknown, it's innovation and technology. There's so as the ceiling, the roof is lifted off the house, so to speak, you know, everything is possible. And that's the timeline I'm holding on to, because where you put your energy and your focus is what, you know, is going to come into your perspective, because I don't know for other people what they need, right? So.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because that has been it's something that I've heard, you know, more than a few friends that we've been connecting with recently on this journey who've kind of mentioned like, oh, you know, we're switching over to this new age at this point, and I think a lot of folks are feeling that not only some of the turbulence, I guess, is I think, you know, just like with any change, there's going to be turbulence. There's going to be things that, like you said, that we could point at and say that feels bad and that feels good, but they're all just sort of changes that are taking place that we happen to be kind of in the midst of. And I really believe that not only, as you said, that this is our chance to kind of have an active role and decide like what we tune into, what we focus our energy on. But I do believe that, for lack of a better term, and I did air quotes, they also are aware of this, right? I think that it seems in my research that I've come across that probably one of the biggest secrets that's attempted to be kept from us is the power and the potential of our minds and the power for us to really be creators. And 100% the folks who are trying to perhaps steer the next age into a direction that benefits them are totally aware of that, totally aware of the power of our creation. And so I think a big part of our kind of resistance, you know, when I talk about conscious resistance, is to reclaim ourselves and to reclaim our own power, recognize that we are power, that we can connect to the earth, that the earth is power, this natural planet that we come from, this man, you know, everything that we are an extension of, the earth, Mother Earth, and the creator is where we can get our energy from and where we can get our power from. And the more that we tap into that, and I think play an active role, then we can shape the direction we're going into. You know, I'm sure some of your audience has come across the phrase, the Great Reset, recently. And this is kind of a, you know, a term that's being thrown about by these folks who would like to be the drivers of society and the sort of engineers of where we go as a humanity. And I believe absolutely that they are trying to tap into the same shift, the same change. You know, the people behind the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, they're having their next meeting in January. So this is going to be post the equinox, right? So in that beginning phase of this kind of shift, they're hosting like, here's going to be our grand announcement of what the Great Reset is and what's that going to look like and how are we going to remake the world for humanity, because we know what's better. Again, it's to me, it's a total disrespect of the individual autonomy and individual liberty that each of us are, that we each possess just as our divine right of being born, that we all own ourselves. And so instead they want to say, like, we're going to be the drivers of this. And I think that the answer is then, what I've been calling for is for the greater reset or the people's reset, that let's tap into that. Let's recognize that the status quo prior to COVID isn't good. And like you said, with consumption and all these other issues that we could talk about, and this other sort of vision for a great reset, I don't think it's going to be what most of us, it doesn't seem to be concerned with individual privacy or liberty and bodily autonomy. It's more of like, what's good for the collective, forget what the individual is good for the individual. So I'm really encouraging people, like, let's tap into the fact, maybe we're going from Pisces, we're going to Aquarius, we're going from 1 year to the next, we're going from potentially a president to the next president, we're going to this great reset. There's a lot of momentum here, there's a lot of changes, and people have seen the consequences of COVID as well as the consequences of the response to COVID, and recognize that change is necessary. So either we're going to take an active role in that and guiding and shaping where that goes, or we're going to be sort of just passive and allow somebody else to direct what that looks like for us.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because you're right. Like, they do understand all of this, and they are attempting to drive a certain ship. So more than ever, that's why these conversations like you and I are having are so important, because us two coming together is putting out a call exponentially. There is that, when two or more gather, that's an incredibly powerful, when two humans get together, there is an immense amount of power. So here we are, putting out this call. Actually, that's what I'm feeling in this moment, putting out this call. I'm putting it out to myself, and I'm putting it out into the world, that we all like tap in and reclaim our sovereignty, our autonomy, and understand that power. And you don't need to know exactly anything. You just need to see what is and see what's true, and allow that to come in to your field, and then work from that place of integrity. What do you want? It puts it all back on the individual. Like, what do I want? What kind of world do I want to live in? Do I want to live in a world where somebody is taking my money at every turn, tricking me into, thinking that, this, disease thing or this virus is worse than it is, causing fear and trauma in the nervous system of so many humans by overtaking, the media and the airwaves, and censoring so many doctors, scientists, journalists, people, just censoring any information that they don't want put out. They don't want put out there. But that's the call. Like, what's your integrity? Because like you said with the Houston radio, our beacons are beep, 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 they're going. So it's like, it's up to the individuals to hear the call that's coming into the heart, and to act from that place of integrity. And it's like, maybe that's the conversation that we're really having with our actions.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like you said, it's a call to action. It's a call to recognizing the role that we're all going to play. And again, that's going to look different for different people. You feel called to broadcast, long form interviews and share those with your community and with the world, and hopes of, like you said, kind of spurring those new connections, planting those new seeds. And that's going to lead to other people feeling called to do other things in different ways. And that might be, well, I got to start my own podcast now, or I need to share this with somebody, or, maybe I can take a more active role. But I do think that, if there's any message that comes across for folks that hear this, that is definitely my message, is that you have the power within your own heart. And I don't mean that any sort of cliche, silly kind of thing. Like, I mean it truly, that we have the power within our own heart and our bodies to determine the direction and the shape of our world and where we go from here. And we can either tap into that creative energy, which I believe does exist within every single one of us, no matter our doubts, fears, insecurities, experiences, environmental factors. Each of us have that potential when we're ready to tap into it. Or we can sit back and kind of either, as you said, live in fear and, just let somebody else take over the direction we're going, or simply just acquiesce. And I choose to enjoy this beautiful journey by being very proactive and just, going in the direction that I want. I know what I want to create. I know I want to help other people, and I know that's why I'm here. And I feel most joyful when I'm tapping into that purpose. And I think that's really what we're at now, is like, whatever your purpose is, whatever you feel it's calling to you, now is probably the time to do that more than ever, and to use that purpose and that gift to see how you can contribute to this idea that we are all going to recreate and reset the direction that humanity gets to go.
Yeah. Amen. That's awesome. So where are people gathering and connecting these days with their co-creation ideas? Like, that's something that I'm interested in building, actually. The other conversation I like to have is like the actual building of the new. And I'm not seeing it the way I would like it to be, because it's like people hear this and then they're like, okay, but what do I do now? Because everybody, it's better when we join up together, because there's power in numbers, right? I mean, it's physics. So, do you know of any, like, besides social media, and like, where are people co-creating? Are they just co-creating like in little pods?
I think it's obviously, there's stuff going on online, but I will say that I have been involved in promoting the concept of freedom cells as a way for people to organize for the last 4 or 5 years, and we do have a website for that. But the goal of sort of this movement is to encourage people to meet, and these local decentralized groups, we encourage people to aim for like the number of 8. There's some good group dynamic studies on why that number 8 is kind of ideal. And so we encourage people, whether you got 3 or 4 people, you're aiming for 8, whatever you have, start meeting with the people that are in your area. And the website, basically what it offers is you can sign up, you can create a profile and put what are your skills, what are your interests. And so it operates in a social media network in that sense. But the main part of it, the main reason for it existing, is the maps. So when you create your account, you put where you're at, and then it adds you to the map. And then you can search the map and find people who are within 5 miles, 10 miles, 50 miles of you, and then connect to them with the goal of meeting in real life, in person, to try to start organizing locally. So you can search the individual map to find people. And we also have the cells map that helps you show, like, if people have already created groups in your area, you can connect with them. And people post like, hey, we have a meeting coming up. And the whole goal, though, is to encourage people to meet in this local decentralized fashion, where you're encouraging each other to share knowledge, to share skills, to figure out, hey, how can we grow our own food together? How can we be that support network for each other? How can we make sure that we each know how to can our own vegetables, or we want to make our own soap, or whatever sort of skills that you could come up with, as well as different forms of activism. Maybe you go out and do some homeless activism, some homeless support. Maybe you go out and build a community garden together. I mean, there's so many different ways that this concept can be used and applied. And I started writing about it and promoting it in 2015, 16. And I'm happy to say that, again, with COVID, like, this has spurred so many people to start looking for solutions. So we've seen exponential growth on the website. We now have 7,000 people from all around the world, and particularly people active in Australia, active in India, active in different parts of the US. And it's really beautiful to see. And of course, they all look different based on the local needs, the resources, the interests of the group. Not every focus is in the same goals. So some people might be like, for example, some people are groups of parents who are more interested in how are they going to educate their children out of the corporates, and their children, and maybe childcare, and just a number of different things. But the goal, again, is just to try to connect to people. So you ask about co-creation, and I can say that there's a lot of co-creation going on that platform, and it has been growing to a great way. And for me, again, the goal, and this is why it's been beautiful to see, the goal is to get people to meet in person. And it's really a rewarding feeling to see or to hear from people, hey, I met somebody in my area through the website. Like because there's so many people who really do, back to some of those problems, do really feel isolated right now, do feel very concerned. I get emails from folks who are really like, feel like they're on the edge of everything, and they're really concerned, and they feel alone and isolated. And I think that's part of what the system wants us to feel, is to feel like we're alone, there's nobody else out there. So it's been really cool to be a part of this experience of facilitating connections and helping people find each other. Now, from there, of course, it's up to them what they do. Some people are saying, all right, I'm trying to find a freedom cell. We've also heard them called circles, hubs, hives, pods. The name is pretty irrelevant. It's just a concept. But maybe they connect to other people, and their goals are, we're going to go buy land together. We're going to build an intentional community together. That's kind of what I'm working on down in Mexico, looking for land. Others are people who live in the city or the suburbs, and they're just looking for like minds to connect with, to like, hey, I want to be around other people who know what's going on, and how can we support each other? How can we, just make sure that whatever comes our way, that we're able to thrive and to continue to support each other. And in the times of COVID, where businesses are being shut down, where there's the United Nations warning of a rise in poverty and food inequalities, like these are important times to be connected. I really do think that the answer, in addition to everything we already discussed and working on our own internal world, is to have community and to connect with community, whether that means getting a piece of land together or just having people that you can connect to in your particular local environment. And even within that, you can have a freedom cell that it might be equally important for you to learn how to grow your own food, as it is to have some form of self-defense, as it is to do a weekly reading of the four agreements, or something like that. Maybe there's a ways to incorporate the spiritual growth, the conscious evolution into your freedom cell, into your hub, into your circle. So I do encourage people who are looking to connect with other people to check out the website. It's freedomcells.org, and it's a totally community ran project, just me and two other guys, and we're just trying to keep up with the growth right now. That's the way we see it, is like the opportunity. Again, this chaos has presented a beautiful opportunity. So many people are looking for people, and we have the opportunity to help them find each other and to see where those beautiful connections go. Like you said, it's coming from all different directions, right? So I can help create the website and promote the website, and the connections that are made through there are going to lead to all kinds of beautiful things that I might not ever see or know about, but it's just so powerful. So I know that there is a lot of co-creation going on, that there are a lot of people really trying to think of what does the future look like for me and my family. And I think that one of the solutions to being able to thrive is to come together and, like you said earlier, strength in numbers.
Yeah, awesome. That's so great. I did hear about your freedomcells.org now that I'm remembering, because I think this isn't a very important point, because there are so many people stressing out and wondering like what they're going to do and how is this going to be, because our survival mind is kicking in. And but there are more of us that are seeking that connection and that co-creation. So yeah, freedomcells.org. That's awesome. So much coolness. You're very solution oriented. I can't tell you how refreshing this is. It's so
I
nice.
appreciate that.
Yeah, truly. And so before we sign off, just tell people a little bit more about your books and like where they can find you. I mean, I'll have that up on your speaker page, um but just maybe just a little overview, because there's a lot of information that you as a person have to offer all of
Sure.
us, especially in the environment we're in today.
Sure. Well, again, I appreciate you taking the time to let me share some of my ideas and story with your audience and with you, and get to know you a little better. I appreciate that. So my main website for my work is just theconsciousresistance.com. And that is where, if people are interested in seeing more of my journalism, as far as my video reports and articles, you can see all that there. But also there's a books tab on there, and there's a documentaries tab, and you can watch all my documentaries for free. I put out a documentary earlier this year called The 5G Trojan Horse, which focuses on the 5G situation, obviously, and sort of follows my journey in Houston. Like you said, I ran for mayor, and a big part of it was trying to expose some of the concerns about 5G. And so it follows my journey of like confronting the local politicians about it, recognizing that nobody's listening, and deciding to run for mayor to bring this issue to the forefront. That, as well as some of my other documentaries, can be found on the website. And then my books, all of my books are available to download for free, except for the one I mentioned earlier, the new version of the trilogy, all is one book. Since it's with the publisher, I can't release it for free like I have in the past. But if you want to see any of the original versions, you can download the PDFs. And that book is available on, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. I believe it's available on Amazon. I just try not to promote Amazon. And if you can request to get it at your local bookstore as well. And I didn't mention earlier, but one of the other books that I wrote that I think your audience might really enjoy is called The Holistic Self-Assessment. And it basically is that process I was describing earlier when we were talking about holistic activism or holistic anarchism, is kind of looking at different areas of your life and trying to see where you might be inconsistent with the values and the principles that you proclaim to, hold near and dear to you. So the book is very simple and very, very short, and it's literally meant to be a guidebook, a workbook that like the physical version, it has space for you to write in, to take notes. But again, you can download the PDF and you can create a notebook for it. It basically is 10 simple chapters that each chapter asks a question, and each chapter ends with an exercise or a couple of different exercises. And it sort of mimics the process that I took myself through whenever I went to prison. And so the first question is, who am I? Then what are my principles? What are my goals? What are, looking at my habits, and are my principles, goals, and relationships in line with those, with each other? And sort of looking, maybe I'm not living in line with the beliefs that I believed I had as much as I thought. And so that's an opportunity to examine that, to see why, and then to make appropriate changes if you desire to. So that book, The Holistic Self-Assessment, it is available for purchase, and it is available for download for free. And within the next week or so, maybe by the time your audience is hearing this, it's going to be available online as a 9-week online course as well that people can check out, that I'm really excited to share. And we've been working on that for a little while. So that's, and like I said, the Conscious Resistance Trilogy is available. So my books, my documentaries, all my journalism are there. And then I also have the derrickbroze.com website. I don't update it too much, but if people are interested in kind of getting a more detailed version of my backstory, there's a bio page that kind of goes a little bit more in detail about some of that stuff that I went through. And other than that, I'm just happy to be here. Like I said, happy to be part of this beautiful experience that we are in together. And I cannot imagine where we're going to be in a year from now, but I'm excited to be a part of it.
Ain't that the truth? Woo! Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us on the summit. We really appreciate it. And best of luck to you, Derrick.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.